Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a phantasmal Charles Coulombe.
Phantasmal?
Yes.
You mean I'm sort of a phantasm, or I'm surrounded by phantasms, or kind of eerie in some sense, not to say eldritch?
Yes. Spooky.
Spooky. Now, is it inherent to me? Is it the time of year?
Both.
Oh, gee. Well, thanks a lot. All right, fine. I don't care. You know, we do have a saying in my family that there are only 2 days of the year that we're able to be ourselves on: Halloween and April Fools. The rest of the year we pretend.
It's very true.
Oh, thanks. You're supposed to say that's not true. What a terrible thing to say.
Okay, that's not true. What a terrible thing to say.
Could you do that with a little more sincerity as though you meant it?
That's not true. What a terrible thing to say.
Forget it. We'll just take it as read and pretend you meant it. All right, never mind. Well, it has been an amazing 2 weeks since last I sat in this chair staring at you.
Hey, you're back from Denmark.
I'm back from Denmark, and you see, what am I wearing on my lapel?
That's their flag, right?
Yes, the Dannebrog, brought from heaven to Valdemar Atterdag when he was fighting the Estonians, who were pagan at that time, on a crusade, I'll have you know, because the Danes in those days were really Catholic. And in fact, while I was in Denmark, which was a wonderful sequel, by the way, to my trip to Budapest, which was also a great event, which in itself was a great sequel to my visit to Slovenia, which in turn was a great sequel, despite the 5-day quarantine in between, to my trip to England. But Denmark. I was invited to a Latin Mass men's retreat, and it was great. About 20, 25 young men, half of them married with children, all but maybe 2 of them converts in recent years. Really full of zeal, full of zip, very devout, very pious, and very fun. 2 Latin masses with 2 very good priests who were there. 2 Latin masses, 2 Latin complines. The conferences I couldn't really follow because they were in Danish, which I do not know. The only Danish phrase I know is "Husker du," which means "Do you remember?" It was the name of a board game when I was a kid. But it was a really, really wonderful event. And the first day before I went out to where the retreat was held, a fellow picked me up at the airport, and amongst other things, he took me to see the Little Mermaid, the statue. It's very famous. It's in Copenhagen Harbor. But you see, I had to explain to him that the real Little Mermaid, like the real statue of Thorvaldsen in the Lutheran Cathedral, the Thorvaldsen statue of Christ, the real one of both of them are actually at Forest Lawn in Glendale. And see, because he didn't know that.
Yeah, how did he take that?
He looked at me a little oddly, but and then he sort of sighed and rolled his eyes, and he said, "If you say so," but which I took as acceptance. But no, seriously, he did say to me that most Americans are very disappointed when they see the Little Mermaid because they're expecting something a lot bigger. Like the size of the Statue of Liberty. If you ask me, a mermaid the size of the Statue of Liberty would be one creepy statue.
Yeah.
But people are very disappointed. I wasn't though, because having seen the original at Forest Lawn, I knew exactly what size it was. But he was a very, very good fellow. And the interesting thing about him, you know that I had a professor here who died, Dr. Daniel Kiergaard. In fact, a friend of mine sent me in Denmark sent me a copy of 20. It's a book called Hjem, H-J-E-M, which means home, and it's a story of 20 converts to Catholicism from Denmark in recent, it's their personal stories. So I don't read Danish, and I lent it to Dr. Kierkegaard. Well, she felt very badly about where her country was going and so forth. But reading that book really, really picked up her spirits. So, and then later, of course, she died. So this gentleman who picked me up, and very nice guy, he his was one of his story was in the book, as was that of another fellow I met on the retreat. And he said, I never heard of Dr. Kierkegaard until she died, and I read about her in the National Catholic Register. And he mentioned in passing that he'd been one of the people in Hjem. And I laughed, and I said, well, if it makes you feel any better, you may not have known her, but she knew about you because she read your story in the book and was very, very heartened by it. So, now this was a very unique gathering because it brought these people together. Many of them, if not most, had never met each other before, but it brought them from all over Denmark. And uh, it was just a really, really good time. Amongst other things, we had a sort of rosary procession through the Danish forest with rowan trees growing all over the place. Their red berries, quite astonishing. A fellow at the head with the crucifix, in procession, and we marched along, saying the rosary, and the priests heard confessions, and we emerged eventually from the woods at a 14th century church that now Lutheran, but it was Catholic, of course, for most of its career, and it was wonderful. It was really just a great experience, great bunch of people. I was really, really honored to be among them. But I've always wanted to visit Denmark, so it ended last Sunday, and a group of us went to venerate the relics of Saint Canute IV, King Saint Canute, who was the patron saint of Denmark. His relics were not destroyed at the Protestant revolt, and in fact, you can actually see them. I mean, they're in an open coffin under glass. So we're able to venerate the relics. He's all there, most of him anyway, all bones. So we venerated him, and had a very nice dinner in Ods, as they call the town that looks like Odense on the map. And then the following day, which was Monday, I went out to the wilds of the island of Zealand, upon which Copenhagen sits, and I saw Roskilde Cathedral, which was a Catholic cathedral. And then I went out to Frederiksborg Castle, which is the National Historical Museum now. Beautiful castle. And then up to Elsinore, to Kronborg Castle, which we know because of Hamlet. And it's a fascinating place. For the Danes, it's more famous because it's supposed to be where Ogier le Danois, Charlemagne's companion, Ogier Dansk, sleeps under enchantment of Morgan le Fay. But he will rise again to lead the Danes whenever they're really threatened. So there's a statue of him down in the casemate of the castle, sitting there in stone. So it was actually plaster, but he's asleep, waiting to wake up. Then I went to a church in the town, which was medieval, very beautiful, St. Olawi, St. Olaf. And that was the Monday. Tuesday, I was coming back in the evening, but Tuesday morning, I went to Christiansborg Castle, which is where the Parliament meet. But it was the royal castle, and the Queen still has some rooms there that are very interesting. And I went to the chapel there, went to the Catholic Cathedral again, St. Ansgar, which has the double-headed eagle inside because it was financed by the Austrian emperors, who were responsible for financing the church in Scandinavia and northern Germany. before 1914. It was one of their little jobs that they don't get any credit for. Kind of like so much of the other many wonderful things they did. Not that we're biased. And then I went to Rosenborg Castle, which is like the Tower of London in a sense, because it's filled with goodies, including the Danish crown jewels, which are incredible. But in the midst of all this, I had lunch at the fabulous Hotel d'Angleterre. It goes back to 1755, luxury hotel, tornadoes Rossini, tornadoes of beef. It was incredible with duck liver, with pate. It was really good. It was delicious. I mentioned it was delicious. And truffles. See, in Denmark, truffles are very common. So the tornadoes Rossini were covered with delicious black truffles because truffles are very common in Denmark at this time of year, and I love truffles, so I was really happy. They're expensive everywhere else, but in Denmark, they're really no truffle at all. Yeah, it was really good though.
Okay.
Very, very good. So that was Denmark, but of course, the earlier part of the week I was in Hungary, and I was there for the launch party for the European Conservative, and that was a lot of fun. And I love being in Budapest, as I always do. And I went out to Esztergom and saw the Basilica and Cardinal Manzenti's tomb, and Gerdelow, which is the royal country house. Although it was closed when I got there, despite the computer promising it would be open. We're not bitter. And the Matthias Templum, the Coronation Church, really just one wonderful thing after another. It was a good time. And I met a lot of really interesting people in Hungary, from Hungary and Poland and Serbia, and all over Central Europe. It was just a great gathering. And then before that, I was in Slovenia, in Ljubljana, Laibach, and I really had a great time there. I met a whole bunch of really neat people. It's I must say, it's wonderful being over here. Unfortunately, Travel Town has come to an end because Monday classes begin again.
Ah.
So I've got to get back to work, in other words.
Finally. It's about time.
What do you mean about time? Do you realize that this is the tail end of the travel cycle that began with my seeing you into wedded bliss?
I know. I'm aware. You've been living it up.
That's right. I've been on my own honeymoon, pal. You're the only one who'd have me. And let me tell you something. When I would show up at a hotel with that just married thing on the back and people just saw me coming in, they'd say, "Where's the bride?" I'd say, "Me." And then they kind of say, "Oh, you must be very advanced. Where's the groom?" I'd say, "Me." And they, I'd rent the honeymoon suite in hotel after hotel, and they all looked at me as though I were crazy. I insisted that 2 glasses be sent up with champagne. There'd be chocolates on the pillow. What?
I almost believe part of that, actually, because you just because you do. I have seen you mess with people like that in person. So.
What? I've been helping.
Helping what? How?
Expanding the horizons.
Why is that important?
Why? So they're not closed in and provincial.
You don't even.
You ever heard the phrase "shucking and jivin"? That's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, that's what you be doing.
Yeah, I'm shucking and jivin'. It's for white people too now. It's like jazz. Shuckin' and Jivin' is no longer for blacks alone. I mean, well, stop and think about it. Every major leader you know in the world today, it's not just for Americans either. I mean, stop and think about this. take jazz. Now, jazz, originated in the black American population. It was picked up by whites. It sort of developed in America amongst both whites and blacks in the South. Then it got picked up in places like Chicago, New York, and so on. And then it went overseas. And you had people in Europe like Django Reinhardt, who was a master jazz man. But he was half French, half gypsy. I mean, you can't imagine someone further removed from the origins of jazz than Django Reinhardt.
Yeah.
But he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. All right. Well, similarly, Shuckin and Jivin originated, so they say, as a means for the black man to deal with the oppressive white in the days of Jim Crow. Some put it far back into slavery days. But at any rate, it was a way of evading uh, questions by authority figures, unpleasant situations, even escaping harm. The whole thing with Brer Rabbit, please don't toss me in the briar patch. It's sort of the same kind of a deal. In recent years, a lot of white commentators have gotten into trouble, ranging from Andrew Cuomo to Sarah Palin to the late Rush Limbaugh, when they've accused various black politicians of shucking and jiving. And they've been going, oh, that's racist. But I think shucking and jiving has transcended its origins the way jazz did. It has become, on the one hand, something uniquely American and true of all races in our country, especially those in power. So, for instance, when you've got the Secretary of Health, after this guy, this guy gets both vaccines, right? He gets both shots. He dies. He gets COVID and he dies, having had the vaccines. And the Secretary of Health declares, well, it's true he died, but if he hadn't gotten the vaccines, he'd be even worse off. Shucking and jiving. What is he saying with that? What, did he come back as a flesh-eating zombie?
Wait, did you use the right pronoun there?
What? Well, all right. She, he, it. I don't know.
Okay. Maybe they were, I think it's they. Maybe they were saying that he would have had been more likely to survive or closer to surviving.
Except that he died. That doesn't make any sense at all. And you know what? Now that you mention it, even the use of the funny pronouns is shucking and jiving.
What's funny about they?
Well, for one thing, you're talking about a singular individual. In the English language, we have two different things. There's plural and singular.
What about the royal we?
That's different. We don't have kings. We're free of it. We're free of it by the Constitution. The Declaration of Independence freed us from that. The way the Civil War freed us from the plural when referring to the United States.
Okay.
I mean, it should be the United States are, but men died to alter it grammatically. Which in itself is an example, as I say it, of shucking and jiving.
There are different things in the English language, like everyone. That's many people, but that's singular. So why can't they be singular if everyone is singular?
Because everyone is referring to the one. Every one.
Everybody.
Well, see, you don't say everybody. Well, that's everybody. It's still singular.
All right, Charles, so be it.
No, well, I'm not. It's not. I don't make up the rules. It's my second language. I had to learn them. And that's not all.
Okay.
Because shucking and jiving is not restricted to American figures either.
Okay.
It has come to me that the supreme example at this moment in time of shucking and jiving is the Pope's alleged motu proprio on the Latin Mass.
Okay, go on.
Well, if you read it, no, here's what I'm saying. Part of the whole shucking and jiving experience is throwing up pointless facts that are really sort of meaningless and acting as though they're meaningful. You know, you divert the question with a ridiculous answer. I've been doing it my whole life, I know. Uh, you read the so-called motu proprio, which in itself, again, to be authoritative would have to be in Latin, but it's not. Shucking and jiving. You read the thing, it says, "Oh, there's this terrible division that's arisen in the church." No, there hasn't. At least there's the synodal way. I mean, but that's not mentioned. There's all sorts of things that are happening, but they're not mentioned. And he contradicts Pope Benedict's carefully and thoroughly reasoned explanation of the situation. He's shucking and jiving. He is the Django Reinhardt of shucking and jiving. As Django Reinhardt was to jazz, the Holy Father is to shucking and jiving, and in this document has raised shucking and jiving to a real art form.
It's
Because,
great.
well, it is. Because here's the funny thing. In its origins, shucking and jiving was meant to conceal the powerless from the powerful. Here it's reversed. It's used to shield the powerful from the powerless.
Wow, that's actually pretty profound, Charles.
I didn't say I wasn't. It really is. It really is pretty profound. The man is a master at shucking and jiving. So from now on, I may be accused of cultural appropriation, but again, as with jazz, as with the roots of Southern cooking, I think it's a phrase that is very appropriate, and I think it fits most of us, if not all of us, in the modern world. We all shuck and jive.
What's
And
wrong with that?
not a thing. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. But it shows, and I think the reason for it, to be honest with you, is because authority is gone, and power is so absolute today. And again, when there is no real authority, when there is no rule of law, there's only the exercise of power and the attempt to evade the consequences of that exercise. And that's where we are now. Shucking and jiving is the province of both the rulers and the ruled today. It is the universal medium of exchange.
Wow. All right.
But
We
you know
do
who it doesn't do any good with?
who?
You know who you can't shuck and jive with?
Tyrone.
Well, that's yeah. You better not. I mean, that boy knows all about it. And no,
uh,
you don't want to shuck and jive with Tyrone. No, sir. I mean, I have heard him say, "Don't" to various people. Don't do that, and in no uncertain terms. No, but it wasn't Tyrone I was thinking of. Think of the time of year it is.
okay, it's fall.
It's October.
It's October. Go
We're
on.
getting closer and closer to Halloween.
Okay.
The shadows are lengthening. The veil between the worlds gets ever thinner.
Okay.
We are in the October country. And you know what Ray Bradbury said about the October country?
Yes.
Good, because you're going to hear it again.
Okay.
I love this quote. This is from Ray Bradbury, ladies and gentlemen. October country. That country where it is always turning late in the year. That country where the hills are fog and the rivers are mist. Where noons go quickly, dusks and twilights linger, and midnights stay. That country composed in the main of cellars, sub-cellars, coal bins, closets, attics, and pantries faced away from the sun. That country whose people are autumn people, thinking only autumn thoughts, whose people passing at night on the empty walks sound like rain.
So you can't shuck and jive with the fall with the autumn people?
You can't shuck and jive in the October country, no sir. Because you know who else come out in this time of year?
Fairies?
Ah! We don't call them that. I've warned you, you don't use the F word around this time of year. We call them the good neighbors.
Oh, good neighbors.
We call them the good folk. We call them the blessed folk. Okay. And we don't annoy them. Okay? We don't use the F word. They don't like it. They get very upset. You don't really want to.
The elves?
Ah! You don't use the E word. You don't use those words. They don't like them this time of year. Just don't do that.
Okay, I'll respect the wee folk.
No, you don't use the W word this time of year. I told you. The good neighbors, the good folk, the blessed folk. You don't use those pejoratives. They don't like it. They get very obstreperous this time of year. And if you, I mean that in a good way. I mean that it actually has a good meaning. You know, the one you were thinking of that you just, it actually also means really nice people. It does, really. You know, here in Austria, they have a lot of interesting folk customs and folk beliefs, many of which are believed to be based on reality of some sort or another. So could I ask you, please, to say right here and now, you won't use until after Halloween the words you used. Okay? Would you do that for me, please? Please.
Okay, I won't use fairy.
Don't say them. No, don't say that. Don't say that. Don't say them. Just say you won't use those words again until after Halloween. That's all I'm asking. I don't think it's a lot to ask. I'm sure you don't mind, and you do it anyway. You didn't have to be reminded, right? Right. You didn't have to. Okay, now go ahead. Just say you won't use them until after Halloween.
Won't use those words until after Halloween.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Okay. Yeah, that's better. All right. All right. I feel a lot better now. Yes. Also, could you make a point of yes, could you make a point of not leaving out iron in the living room?
Okay, I'll write that down right now. Don't leave out iron in living room.
Okay. And actually, what? Okay, sure. Whatever. All right. And if you could, if don't leave iron out, but if you left outside the door some bread, some salt, and some candy corns, maybe every night for the next few weeks until Halloween. That, yes. No. Anyhow, that might be a good idea.
Those little monsters are asking for a little too much.
I don't. Oh, you know what? Actually, that's not one of the words. Monsters. That's not one of the words. You can say monsters because you know what? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. You can say monster, 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 and there's nothing you can do about it. Monster.
Okay.
But I would still I would still leave some of that stuff out if you could if you would do that, please.
Okay. I can do that, Charles, for you. Okay. So, are we situated? Are we settled?
One other thing I would say is don't leave little sets of clothes out for them.
You can count on me for that, Charles. I will not set out little clothes for them.
Good. All right. As long as we understand each other.
All right, are we settled? Are we comfortable?
I don't know. I what does that even mean these days?
Well, are you ready to proceed? Are we able to proceed with the memes of production?
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good.
Sure, let's go. What do we got?
We have just kind of one from your godson, Ruru, I guess. Let me put
Ruru.
it let me put it on the screen. I guess so. He said Charles in Groiper form, and basically Charles is a frog, I guess. I don't know what a Groiper is. I don't know what any of this is all about.
Well, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, and notice an Indian lad, native of Calcutta, doctoral candidate at the University of Cambridge, knows more about youthful American politics than you do.
Why would I care about youthful American politics?
Because you're an American and you're into politics and you're kind of youthful in a sort of secondhand cast-off way.
Just a bunch of LARPing.
Well, if you say so. Anyway, the Groypers, as I understand it, they are the supporters of a young gentleman called Nicholas Fuentes.
Okay.
And they got their start, I think, feeling that Trump's legacy was being betrayed by a lot of Trump insiders while Trump was still president. I think that's right. I could be wrong.
Okay. Very good.
All right.
All right, good. So we've got that settled. That is it for the memes this week.
That's it?
That is
You're not going to show the other one?
What's the other one? Wait, what?
The other one with the chick.
Oh, you want
protesting Viagra?
No, I'm not showing that one.
That's too crude, but it's all right, ladies and gentlemen. I don't mind talking about it. Basically, one of the things that's happened this week, and last week with the Texas decision, is that feminist chicks are going cray-cray. And they're saying things that if you stopped and thought about it, you just feel like saying, yeah, okay, great. I mean, they're threats. So like they're saying, we're not going to sleep around until we can abort our kids. Okay. Don't. I'm not going to hang out in bars picking up any man that comes along until I can abort my child. That's great, honey. I'm glad to hear it. I want you to stay home. And of course, Bette Midler really, she made us all breathe a sigh of relief. She says she's not sleeping with any guy until it happens. All of American manhood collectively let out a sigh of relief.
She's still alive?
Bette Midler? Well, yeah. Alive enough to talk and to threaten the withholding of her senescent charms from the American populace.
I mean, what did Bette Midler ever... I mean, she's saying, what, you're the wind beneath my wings or whatever, and that's it? And then she's supposed to be somebody because she sang a song?
Well, yeah. You know how it is in America. Everybody, we all get our 15 minutes of fame, and then we're forgotten until we're convenient again, and then we're used. But it's all been extremely funny in that regard. Speaking of shucking and jiving, I mean, gang, I'm going to practice chastity until I can murder my kid. I don't know what sort of who are they threatening? Well, trashy guys, I guess. I mean, think about it. It means the ladies of last call will vanish.
Yeah, it's so weird. These people say these things and they think it's like the slam dunk silver bullet type thing where it's like, no, like that thing where it's like, oh, science is real, women's rights are human rights, love is love, um, all these things where it's like, whoa, you really got me, you really got me with this one.
You know what it all is. You know
What?
what it all falls under the title of?
What?
Shuckin and Jivin. The misuse of language to pretend, to deflect, to gaslight. Really, it's really your fault that I'm this way.
I mean, it's strange to me when you say science is real as if we're anti-science, and then you say women's rights are human's rights. Well, if okay, according to science, I mean, this thing inside a woman has its own heartbeat and its own DNA. What part of science says that's a human, that's the woman's body?
The part of science that says that flies spontaneously generate from fecal matter. The part of science that says the world is flat. The part of science, what? There were scientists who would assert that once upon a time.
Don't make fun of the flat Earth people. There are tons
of... There are great allies.
There are plenty of Flat Earth Society members around the globe.
And I'm all for them. Yeah, there sure are. That was great.
I think you told that to me off air, where you got that email solicitation where it said they're...
Yeah, the Flat Earth Society have members all around the globe, which I'm sure is true. They should say something about having them scattered around the disc or something, And they don't say anything about the underside of the disc anyway. Gosh, we are in an age where language has become so cheap and meaningless. You can say anything, and people will nod and look as though you said something worthwhile. That's why I say, I mean, Shuckin and Jivin is the universal thing we have today. It's like jazz in the 20s. It is everywhere. You can't avoid it. I mean, they called the 20s the jazz age. This should be the shuck and jive age, because everybody's doing it. Everyone is doing it. But I will say that, like jazz, it is a uniquely American contribution to the bloodstream of the mental bloodstream of the world. I think we should be proud of it. America, home of the shuck and jive.
All right. We have a lot of really great questions today.
I hope I've got decent answers for them this time.
Really important questions. Some even they're so good, some non-patrons sent them in. And it's very rare for me to do that, to include that, because we have such a big backlog.
I'll say.
And also because I know where my bread is buttered.
That's right. Don't we all in this organization? I mean, Lydia, she was really miffed at you. Because she said, usually you send out the announcements about the office Halloween party in the last week in September. And she says you didn't send it out this time. And she wants to know when they're going to get the, get the word from on high.
Who's
also,
Lydia?
She wants to know, what's
Who's
that?
Lydia? That's what I want to know.
Lydia? Who's Lydia? Lydia in the secretarial pool.
Okay. So
she wants to know, and she's not the only one. Cynthia is kind of yapping about it. I mean, not yapping. I mean, very excited. And they also want to know about Thanksgiving, and are they getting the Friday after Thanksgiving off?
Everyone has such a feeling of entitlement nowadays. You know,
It's that time of year.
whether
Look,
it's a pension fund or prior notice, advance notice of a month. I mean, it's
yes.
kind of ridiculous, right?
No, it's not ridiculous. I mean, look, it takes a lot. You've got so many employees there. And remember, when you're putting together a party and a setup like you've got to have everything's volunteer. People are bringing stuff. You've got to get all that coordinated early on. And then the question of the Friday after Thanksgiving. Some years you give it to them, some years you don't, and they never know which it's going to be. So that's the second thing. And don't get me started about the Christmas Club fund.
Okay.
Just saying.
All right, Charles. Very good. Very good. Moving along.
I do want to say one thing though. It says something to you that nobody else in the operation will talk to you about this stuff except me. That's why they always ask me to do it. They're afraid to talk to you directly.
They're smart.
Ah! That's not very nice. But I will say you're not shucking and jiving.
I don't need a shuck and jive for nobody.
No, certainly not for them. God knows. All right, fine. I'll tell them there will be a Halloween party this year, and they're getting Friday off, right?
You can get more with a kind word and a gun than just a kind word. Who said that?
I don't know. Somebody who knew what they were doing.
I think it was Gotti or something. I think it was something.
Somebody who knew what side his bread was buttered on. That's for sure.
That person didn't have to shuck and jive. I can tell you that.
No, not this much. Although, if it was Gotti, his consigliere, Bruce Cutler, now that boy could shuck and jive.
Oh man,
that man was Mr. Entertainment. I'll tell you. Bruce Cutler was a joy to watch in the courtroom.
I wish they had more videos of him. I could just watch him endlessly.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I have to say that if you've seen the movie or the play Chicago,
Oh no, I haven't.
The lawyer. Well, if you ever do, the thing about the lawyer doing his dance in the courtroom. Yeah.
Wow.
It's magic. Woo! Before your very eyes, ladies and gentlemen, the great illusionist. And that was Bruce Cutler. He was just, a horrible lawyer and apparently not a very good man, but a
very theatrical. Yeah.
What's
that? I said very theatrical.
Oh gosh, yes. Cosa Nostra, the mob, the mafia. No such thing. I remember your great uncle Giovanni used to love to watch him on the news. He'd just say, "You hear him, kid? You hear what he's saying? Sure, it's the truth, isn't it?" That's one of the few times I would see Giovanni laugh endlessly.
Yes. Bruce brought him great joy.
He really did. And more than a few opportunities. Never mind. Right. Anyway, let's move along.
All right. First question from Simon, who says, many atheists say that Pascal's wager is very presumptive. They say that belief in God out of fear of hell is not loving and takes advantage of his love and mercy. What is your reaction to this?
My answer is very simple. I don't see why it would matter to an atheist who has, decides upon faith that there is no God. Why would it matter to him if this non-existent being that he's devoutly believes doesn't exist? Why should he care what attributes he has? I mean, you might as well wonder why Martians don't have green hair, or if they do. No skin off his nose. If I were the atheist, I would be more curious as to what my place in the world was and how I could justify my existence in a universe that is profoundly hostile and not a very nice place to live, since it's all pointless. I'm here by accident, so why bother? In other words, I wouldn't worry about why this mythical God is or is not loving. I'd worry why I'm bothering at all. But I have to admit, I could never really go for atheism simply because the evidence of the miraculous is too much. It would, in the face of it, it would take more faith than I've got.
I would go a different route. That's a good route. But I had been thinking of the concepts of God's love and mercy. I think I don't know, sometime during last year, during the depths of COVID, I got a letter, and it was from a prisoner, I think somewhere in Texas. He was in a prison and he needed books, and he wanted free books. And my mom said, don't send him any books. He's just taking advantage of you. And I thought about that so much, like taking advantage. I think that same day I had just gone to confession. And I thought, well, I'm taking advantage of God. So I owe. I owe. And I'm holding a bad debt that I can't pay off.
Mm.
So you pay it off. So I ended up sending that gentleman some books because you try to you try to follow in Jesus' footsteps, right? So
Well,
that sort of
you
sorry, go on.
you do if you believe in him.
But I'm saying, like, taking advantage of love and mercy is, I mean, yes, you're taking advantage, but then you also have a gratitude of that, and then that you develop love, and it makes you a better person, and that's the foundation of society right there, of a functioning society.
Well, see, the problem is we have never had a functioning atheist society.
Yeah.
We have had atheist societies, but they haven't really functioned very well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, in the face of that, in the face, frankly, not just of the miraculous, but of what faith has produced in terms of beauty and order and art and music and everything.
I mean, just thinking about some more, and just as we're mapping it out right now. I mean, does not every single child take advantage of their parents' love? Should they go out on the street? Otherwise, they're just taking advantage of their parents.
Yes.
That's the same logic.
Yes.
So throw that logic in their face. I mean, should children do this?
Yeah, they should.
You know?
They should go out.
I mean,
Not only that, children should. How do we know for sure? How do children know for sure that their parents love them? They can't know for sure. So they should go out on the street and find someone who does.
that's right. Especially if you believe it's just like an animal biological instinct.
Yeah,
You
well,
know.
I was in a debate with an atheist at one point, and the debate didn't last very long because he announced that he didn't believe in free will. Okay, well then there's no free will, then there's no debate because neither of us nor anybody in the audience hold whatever they hold out of reason. They hold it because they're compelled to by something. So there's no debate. Let's all go drink. That's what I said. That was the end of the debate.
What'd he say?
He didn't have much to say. He looked very annoyed.
You see, that's the thing. You can't live based off these philosophies.
No, you can't. I mean, if you're going to say you have no free will, then there can't be any real argument about anything because there's no such thing as reason. Not really. Reason is an illusion if there's no free will. All there is a compulsion that for whatever reason, for some sick psychological need, we pretend is free. But I'm not going to waste my time if it's an illusion. I'm going to go drink because the animal appetites, like the desire for food and booze, those are real in a way that sitting around talking about the witchness of what is not.
Hmm. Well, I hope that triggered a thought in his head.
Yeah, it did that I was an SOB, but you know, it triggered a thought. It wasn't not a nice one.
Oh.
He was not happy with me, but the audience laughed hysterically, which he didn't like either.
Wow. Okay. Question from Samuel. Charles and Vincent, I hope you're both well. I am currently facing a self-induced dilemma.
Ooh, that's the worst kind,
The
as
worst
I well
kind.
know. Sorry about that, pal. I feel for you.
I would appreciate your comment on it, although I believe it necessary to provide some context to my situation. I am a 23-year-old single man from the heart of England. I was not raised Christian, nor do I consider myself a true Christian yet, although the older I get, the more I feel like I'm leaning towards believing. I've already generated more wealth for myself and my family through good investments than anyone in my family before me, so finances are no longer a concern. Overall, I am healthy in mind and body. I'm aware that I am not in a position to complain about life, as the majority of people around the world are much worse off than myself. Despite acknowledging this, I find myself unsatisfied as I am constantly questioning what I should aim to achieve in life. I've proven to myself if I set my mind to anything, I will achieve it. Over the last few years, the reality of life being a temporary experience has hit me, and I cannot imagine a worse scenario than being in my later age thinking I could have done more with my life. My question boils down to this: is there any method or advice to avoiding that scenario?
There sure is. You know, I'm going to, if I can find it quickly, ladies and gentlemen, there's a quote from a fellow who would normally be the last person on earth you would imagine I would be quoting. A fellow called Walter Potter, who was an Englishman, um, who, in his book on the Renaissance, uh, made a comment that's been quoted forever and ever. Let me see. Well, I'm going to respond first with a quotation from someone I never quote, Henry David Thoreau, who expressed the fear that when he would come to die, he found that he had not lived. And that's what you're talking about. The fear is so well expressed in the film Metropolitan that one should be a failure in the sense of not having lived up to the best that one had in him, um, failing to live up to your own potential. Well, I'm going to hazard an answer for you. And believe it or not, you're already partly on the way to a solution. And you've said so because, well, number one, you've got several things going for you. Firstly, you don't have any immediate financial worries. That's very important because it allows you the leisure to think things out. People who are constantly scrambling for a living cannot do that. So it's very hard for them. And I know, having been there most of my life down to the present, that's why I'm answerable to a tyrannical and sometimes irrational boss. Anyway, the well, no, not present company accepted, of course. The, but the the second thing is you're coming to find belief. Well, as I said in the earlier question, without God, and I take it even further, without the one true faith, it's hard to find any real meaning in life because everything becomes dependent on you. Uh, what do most people today, when we're all encouraged to be our own gods, basically, to decide for ourselves what is good and evil, what is true and false? What is the big horror that people have of dying alone, of dying pointlessly? of frittering away their lives in nothingness. And that's the fear you have. And it's a good fear to have, because such a life is a prelude to hell. So, what I would suggest you do is, number one, and again, I don't know anything about your education, your background, or anything else, but I would propose a two-pronged strategy: supernatural and natural. We'll start with the natural first, because coming from where you are, that's the easiest. Since you've got some leisure, I would become acquainted, if you're not already, with the great works of literature and music and art. And being in the middle of England, believe me, you've got all sorts of possibilities in terms of museums and libraries and so forth, depending upon your tastes and your interests. Uh, the sort of things that people just aren't going in for anymore. That's one thing. That's the natural thing. And that's the parks and gardens and great houses and all that your country is filled with. You can't see everything, believe me. You would spend your life doing it. But go see places like Glastonbury, preferably not during the festival, and Walsingham and Ladywell. And that allows us to glide seamlessly into the supernatural. Because ultimately, and I tell you because I believe it, the Catholic faith has the answers to our dilemma. As St. Bede the Venerable puts it, when a pagan Anglo chieftain was talking about St. Augustine's mission to England, and he said that the human soul is like a bird that flies out of the darkness into a lighted hall, flies around, and then flies out again. And if this man can tell us something about the darkness, we should listen to him. Well, that's what the first Angles to be exposed to the faith responded with. And it's a good response. I would, if I were you, look into finding a Latin Mass or an ordinariate community near me, because you want the Catholic faith unadulterated. You don't want Shuckin and Jivin. You want the real thing. And you'll get that. Or, for that matter, although it would be rather different in terms of style, the Eastern Rites as well, which in England you've got quite a few of. You've got Byzantine and Coptic and so on. But definitely look at the Latin Mass communities around you, and/or the ordinariates folk. And remember that Western society, for 1,500 years, despite its many failings, had answers and produced wonderful things because they had answers. We have more and more and more come to have only questions. One thing you must be assured of, and that is that God did not put you onto this earth for no reason. He has a purpose for you. Your assignment, as with me and as with everyone else, is to find out what that purpose is. But to do that, one of the things you have to do is find out more about Him. And that means not simply intellectually, but dare I say it, sacramentally.
I heard a great sermon a couple weeks ago. I think it was according to the new calendar. But the priest made the point that the entire beginning of philosophy of where you're headed in life begins with the question that Jesus says to Peter, "Who do you say that I am?"
Who do you say that I am? The Catholic Church responds, you're the second person of the Holy Trinity, the being through and by whom all things were made, who comes down every day on all the altars of Christendom in bread and wine. In fact, and you'll excuse me for getting quotation heavy on you, but uh, even though I'm Catholic, I'm going to quote an Anglo-Catholic, Sir John Betjeman.
Did you quote Thoreau?
I did quote Thoreau.
Oh, I didn't catch it then.
Yeah, it was that. The other guy was Henry David Thoreau.
What was the quote?
Says,
Could you just repeat that?
the quote was that when I should come to die, I found that I had not lived.
Hmm.
But Betjeman, Sir John Betjeman wrote a poem called Christmas. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but he very well expresses the Catholic sense of what lies behind, in this case, Christmas, but all of the remaining Christian externals of our society. And he says, and is it true? I mean, it meaning the Christmas story. And is it true? For if it is, no loving fingers tying strings around those tissued fripperies, the sweet and silly Christmas things, bath salts and inexpensive scent, and hideous ties so kindly meant. No love that in a family dwells, no caroling in frosty air, nor all the steeple-shaking bells can with this single truth compare, that God was man in Palestine and lives today in bread and wine. And that, my dear fellow, is what you must come face to face with. That God was man in Palestine and lives today in bread and wine. And of that bread and wine he calls you to receive. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his justice, and all things shall be added unto you.
All right.
What's that?
All right. Are we done with this one?
Not quite.
Okay.
Do that. Make that your quest for the Grail, and your life will make sense and have meaning and purpose. Now, beyond that general meaning and purpose, other meanings and purposes will become obvious to you. More immediate ones. In other words, it's one thing to know that in the larger sense, you're to seek heaven. But then come the other questions like, okay, that's nice. How? In what way? And what specifically will I do? But those lesser questions get answered when you get the bigger ones first.
All right. Three Cedars Homestead asks, where does one obtain a metal picture or icon of Blessed Karl?
One writes to or emails blessedemperorcharles.org and looks in their online shop.
All right. Question from Giovanni. Hello, Vincent and Charles. Thinking as I am now back to my last year of high school, I am wondering a few things. Firstly, what is the history behind public education, as well as what is its history in these United States?
Well, public education arose in Europe as a result, depending on which country you're talking about, either through revolution or secularization, because throughout Europe, education was considered the province of the church. In different times and ways and places, that right was taken away, and either completely or partially. And that was the birth of public education in Europe. In America, it was a little different. Public education as we know it didn't exist in colonial days because the schools, such schools as there were, and it depended on where you were, there were more in New England than the South, but they were generally religiously connected, even if it was not denominational, but a sort of vague Christianity. The fellow who really originated quasi-secular, and I say quasi because it was still religious influences like prayer and school and so on, but generic. Public education in the United States was originated by a man named Noah Webster, who also created the strange way that we spell English, or as he called it, his Dictionary of the American Language. Uh, but he also originated really the idea of public schools in the sense that we have them. Later on, by a few decades, a man came around named Horace Mann. And Horace Mann believed that American secular public education should be about making good Americans first, before education. And then the last of the trinity of American public school educators was a gentleman in the 1920s called John Dewey, who felt that education should be more about socialization than anything else. And from there, it's gone downhill.
I read all this in a book somewhere. I can't remember the book though.
No, I think I can. Hold on. I don't help. I work best without a net. Puritan's Empire.
That's the one.
Yeah, it talks at several places about the history of American public education because in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, you know what they used to say were the three pillars of America?
What?
The home, the church, and the public school. Because the public school was seen as a place where values were instilled. And the church was seen in a very generic sense. In other words, one thing I remember from my childhood and later my youth, and there are probably still places you'll find this. On Fridays and Saturdays, the newspapers would have religion sections. And those would have different things, religious news, a calendar of religious events over the next week, advertisements for different churches and religious bodies. But they would also have a list of local churches, and very often of different denominations. And very often this would be topped with worship at the church of your choice. And I always thought that, one day if I ever open up a Protestant church of my own, I'll call it the church of your choice, and I'll get all the free advertising.
Could have made a fortune, Charles. You could have made a fortune.
I could have made a fortune, and the name would appeal to the average American. The church of your choice.
That's right.
I mean, people be, oh yeah. See, when I go to the church of my choice, I feel so uplifted. The sermons are always helpful. Dealing with real world problems, and they help me get through the day. A certain amount of inspiration, which I need in my busy life.
Yes.
Isn't that great?
That is great.
Prosperity gospel, buddy.
All right. Secondly, was secularism always a part of the modern public education system? What are some common myths behind the medieval education and schooling?
Well, secularism was not always behind public education until the Supreme Court went on a rampage in the 50s against school prayer. They would read the Bible, usually the King James, and various prayers, more or less Christian in a generic sense, depending on the district. So, for instance, just to give you an example, I think I can go to Wikipedia, source of all truths. They give some samples of school prayers. They gave an example of a prayer, the Regent's Prayer, which was what was said in the, oh my, these are all Christian Child's Prayer. What do you know? So the Regent's Prayer was proposed by the New York Board of Regents. It says, Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon thee, and we beg thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. And that was what, in the state of New York, every school they opened up with until the Supreme Court knocked it down. And you see, it doesn't mention Christ. It was very generic, simply because there's so many Jews and other religious groups in New York, in addition to Christians. But that was knocked down as being too religious.
Do you think that's a good thing, to pray side by side with people of other faith, and that there's a prayer that, you know, are applying to each person differently?
Well, I'm of two minds on it, frankly, because on the one hand, the prayer in public schools was always seen as a danger to Catholic faith. They used the King James Bible. Those places that used the Our Father used the Protestant version. So that was one of the things that was a major impulse behind the Catholic school movement. But having said that, prayer in schools also did show a basic religiosity on the part of the authorities, which is now totally gone. So, I mean, a moment of silence was even forbidden, wherein students would be allowed to say their own prayers silently. That was forbidden by the court.
Yeah, I heard an argument. I don't know who was telling me this, but it was an interesting argument, that it's very unitive. It's a feeling that we as Americans don't have now. The feeling of praying together.
That's true. I mean, when that's why, as I say, people used to say the three pillars were the family, the church, and the public school. Now, you say that today, and it doesn't make any sense. The public schools, you'd hardly consider a pillar of society. But the other thing you've got to bear in mind is that religiosity was the last gasp of an America whose ruling classes were religious. And to put this another way, in 1892, and boy, I'm doing a lot of quoting tonight, but anyway, in 1892, there was a Supreme Court case, Trinity versus the United States. This was a very, very important ruling on the part of the Supreme Court because what it said, basically, there had been a law forbidding the use of foreign contract workers into the states. And it was decided by the Supreme Court that this did not apply to religious workers. And the reason is because the United States are a Christian country, and that was quite a thing. It says the Congress, basically the Church of the Holy Trinity in New York, wanted to bring in a minister from England, and the government stopped it under one of the labor importation laws. So the Supreme Court responded, "We find, therefore, that the title of the act, the evil which was intended to be remedied, the circumstances surrounding the appeal to Congress, the reports of the committee of each house, all concur in affirming that the intent of Congress was simply to stay the influx of this cheap, unskilled labor. But beyond all these matters, no purpose of action against religion can be imputed to any legislation, state or national, because this is a religious people. This is historically true. From the discovery of this continent to the present hour, there is a single voice making this affirmation." Now, catch what they're citing. The commission to Christopher Columbus, prior to his sail westward, is from Ferdinand and Isabella, by the grace of God, King and Queen of Castile, etc., and recites that it is hoped by God's assistance some of the continents and islands of the ocean will be discovered, etc. The first colonial grant, that made to Sir Walter Raleigh in 1584, was from Elizabeth by the grace of God of England, France, and Ireland, Queen, Defender of the Faith, etc. And the grant authorized him to enact statutes of the government of the proposed colony, provided that, quote, they be not against the true Christian faith now professed in the Church of England. The first, and then it goes on and on through all these colonial charters, through all of the state, it goes through the Declaration of Independence, it goes through the constitutions of the various states, all of which invoke God in their preambles. And then, having gone through all this, and then coming up with several legal findings, like this one from Pennsylvania, Updegraff versus the Commonwealth, it was decided that, quote, Christianity, general Christianity, is and always has been a part of the common law of Pennsylvania. Not Christianity with an established church and tithes and spiritual courts, but Christianity with liberty of conscience to all men. And then it goes on about various other findings in various states. And finally, it ends with this. It says, if we pass beyond these matters to a view of American life, as expressed by its laws, its business, its customs, and its societies, we find everywhere a clear recognition of the same truth. Among other matters, note the following. The form of oath universally prevailing, concluding with an appeal to the Almighty, so help me God. The custom of opening sessions of all deliberative bodies and most conventions with prayer. The prefatory words of all wills in the name of God, Amen. The laws respecting the observance of the Sabbath, with the general cessation of all secular business, and the closing of courts, legislatures, and other similar public assemblies on that day. The churches and church organizations which abound in every city, town, and hamlet. The multitude of charitable organizations existing everywhere under Christian auspices. The gigantic missionary associations with general support and aiming to establish Christian missions in every quarter of the globe. These and many other matters which might be noticed add a volume of unofficial declarations to the mass of organic utterances that this is a Christian nation. In the face of all these, shall it be believed that a Congress of the United States intended to make it a misdemeanor for a church of this country to contract for the services of a Christian minister residing in another nation? That's the Supreme Court in 1892.
Not much has changed, huh?
Yeah, it's changed, all right. We're ruled by face sitters. They shuck and jive. They are worthless slime buckets. But to answer the question, thus the secularization of the public school, bearing in mind the public school was generically religious in the sense mentioned, it's only really been secularized since the 50s and 60s. Even the McGuffey readers, which were in the first century or so of public schooling, what we used, they started out very, very religious and became progressively less so until they were eventually abandoned.
All right. Finally, what are the best ways to combat against wrong history and ideologies in public schools?
Well, if you're in public school, you're at the mercy of the teacher. So that's kind of tough. When the time comes, however, that if you're interested in public school, you have to look at the public school board. And part of the problem you have if you're in a big city is that the school board is a huge machine. If you want to do something with public schooling, it's easier to do it in a small school district with a small board.
Yeah, isn't there a lot of educational reform though in terms of structures of power?
No, in fact, it's interesting that the number of school boards, due to amalgamations, since World War II has dropped enormously. Again, I hate to do this, ladies and gentlemen, but uh, just out of curiosity, the number of school boards in the United States, school districts, as they say, um, the numbers have yeah, from 1942 to 1951, the number of school districts declined from 108,579 to 70,452, a 35% amalgamation. Now there are 13,506 school district governments. 13,500 now, down from 70,000 in 1951, which itself had already gone down 35%. And the bigger the school district, the more difficult it is to resist the ideology and false history imposed upon it by the professionals. And you've got the state boards of education as well to contend with.
All right, another question from Giovanni. I was reading about the Nuremberg trials and had learned how Father Sixtus managed to reconvert the National Socialist leader of the General Government of Poland, Hans Frank, to the Catholic faith, and that the former National Socialist Chancellor of Austria, Arthur Seyss-Inquart, seemingly by the prayers of St. Edith Stein, had made his confession to Father Spitzel before both of their executions. Yes. Reading this, it seems surprising that these types of stories, especially that of Arthur Seyss-Inquart's, are seemingly buried as a small footnote while they ultimately are the biggest thing in their lives. I'm wondering what other famous modern converts does Charles know that came from other horrible nations?
Well, I remember Stalin's daughter became a Catholic. I'm pretty sure that's true. And there have been others. I mean, I can't think of any right now. I'm blanking, but suffice to say that you would be amazed at how many converts come out of those terrible situations. There's a very famous, I forget his name, but there was a famous Frenchman in the 50s who was sentenced to death. He was a murderer, but he converted in prison. And he made no attempt to escape his sentence. He felt it was just. And he left behind a very impressive prayer journal. And then he was guillotined. So they still guillotined in France into the 1970s.
Wow. All right, a question from Anita. There are signs that significant numbers of people all around the world are finally getting sick and tired of the values of the Enlightenment that have hijacked Christendom. From the grassroots growth of tradition in the Catholic Church since the Morum Pontificum, to Euroscepticism and Brexit, to the election of Donald Trump and other populist administrations in other countries, to worldwide lockdown protests, to the abject failure of woke sports and entertainment ventures. It seems like more and more people are waking up to the truth that modernism, secularism, and materialism have got nothing for us. I think the forcible disruption of lives and businesses over the last year and a half have accelerated this process. The many people who are beginning to realize that the Enlightenment is bankrupt are now going to look around for something else to take its place. We Catholics know that, we Catholics know what that something else is and should be. Unfortunately, maddeningly, it is precisely at this time that the Catholic Church is being run by men who act as if they are utterly devoid of supernatural faith. My question is, how do we Catholics take advantage of this huge opportunity that we have to build up the kingdom, especially inasmuch as we will be unaided and even actively thwarted by our own shepherds?
Well, depending on where you are, what your situation is, you focus on the immediate. You focus on the people you run into. Uh, you can't worry about the big picture because you have no control over it anyway. So, uh, you know, find a decent parish where you can go. Be sure to wear your religion on your sleeve, as it were. Have parties to which you invite your non-Catholic friends for baptisms and confirmations and all that kind of thing. First communions, because when you do it in that setting, if your daughter's having her first communion and you throw a big party for afterwards and you invite all your friends, especially the non-Catholic ones, believe it or not, they'll want to know what first communion is all about. They may not be willing to listen to what the Mass is any other time, but the justification for a party, everyone's interested in. It's like when you go to a bar mitzvah, everybody wants to find out what it's all about when you're invited to one of those. And that is a means of evangelization that is simple, easy, and pleasant. So I'd emphasize doing that. I would invite my closest non-Catholic friends to Mass with me. See if they'll go. But, always with the prospect of a lunch or breakfast afterwards. That kind of thing. In other words, make evangelization part of what you do and look at it as the background of everything. That's the best way to do it. As far as the macrocosm goes, the big picture, pray for better times. Beyond that, there's nothing we can do about it. So don't worry about it. Eventually, we'll have a decent pope who won't shuck or jive. That would be, can you imagine? I could think of myself saying to a future pope, what is wrong with you, Your Holiness? You had a predecessor who knew how to shuck and jive, who was the Django Reinhardt of shucking and jiving. All you've got to offer your flock, Your Holiness, is the truth. Where's the creativity in that? I hope I live to be in that position.
Right, a question from Giovanni. After living a worldly life for most of my life so far in the past, by the grace of Almighty God, I had come to know the reality of the Catholic Church, and I am trying now to share my faith with other people. Now, about after the lockdowns have been a sense lifted, I had come to see clearly how much worldliness is present in the people I again have remembered, and I find it absolutely insane how these people are living, and I really come to remember as well how ignorant and stupid I myself was once living, with how little I knew, and knowing that if I had died back then, I would have likely chosen to be damned to hell by my own choice. Now, seeing how many people are completely ignorant of objective historical reality, how many people glorify grave evils such as abortion, with one person I've seen so far not even trying to hide what the reality of it is, but then making it sound like some type of joke in an insane way. How many careless blasphemies and other things people say, etc. I come to wonder how exactly is it even possible to convert these people. Even trying to preach history, reality, etc. does not make seemingly anybody care at all or convert them. I know likely through preaching reality I'm not going to become the next St. Anthony or St. Dominic, but seeing how there's seemingly not even a drop of care in these people, I wonder how is it even possible to evangelize to those who seemingly could not care about anything at all and seemingly live just to live?
Well, it's very difficult. But one thing you can always remind them of is that they're going to get older and they're going to die. And then what? Um, and as they get older, if they live just to live, they'll be alone. That's the way it is. Um, you have to wait for your opportunities because when life smacks them in the face, as life does for us all, they won't have any answers for it. You will. Um, so you've got to bide your time. And then, of course, you've also got to accept the terrible truth that a lot of people just don't want the truth and will never want it. I mean, himself said, broad is the gate,
Wait,
broad is the path that leads to
say
destruction.
that again. Wait, who himself said?
Our Lord himself said, narrow is the gate and straight the way that leads to salvation, and few there are that find it. I mean, broad is the way that leads to damnation. And most of us, all the time, and all of us most of the time, are interested in that hell-bent road. It's our nature. All you can do is the best you can do.
I think in a certain sense it's never been an easier sell. I think Christianity has never been an easier sell. If you break it down into various components.
Yeah.
For example, during COVID, they polled young people, and apparently 25% said that they had thoughts of suicide.
Yeah.
More people are having anxiety, depression, mental struggles than ever. And perhaps Father Ripperger might say that this is demonic, this is diabolic. I would say, with various people that I know personally, I think that's true. Because if you think of what is the root of, if you think of what is the root of some of these anxieties, it comes down to a pretty dark philosophy, right? Like a philosophy where everything's just chaotic and random, and you could just die and it's just meaningless. And that's creating this, sort of, the COVID fear on top of everything else, right? Like you're scared of everything now because anything can happen and there's no purpose. And once you die, then that's it. That's an example of, a person's philosophy just enslaving the person, honestly, in this prison of fear and anxiety. And so, in my opinion, in that context, the Catholic faith is liberation. That's
very true.
It's not just this. It's not just the afterlife, but this life as well. Because another thing again, because I struggled with anxiety and all this stuff, and I wanted to build confidence, right? Confidence. What is confidence rooted in? You look at people, it's rooted in the belief that despite anything, absolutely anything that happens, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be fine. And that's what the Catholic faith, when practiced well, can offer people, is that sort of confidence. I think that so many people are just starved for it more than any other time because the machinations, from a marketing standpoint, everybody is just taking advantage of emotion and controlling in controlling people in fear and anxiety. If you look at the headlines regularly, murder hornets, all these other things, marketing messages. I mean, it just feeds off of subjugating everybody, and Christianity helps you just rise above all that. And it gives you a strength that you would not have otherwise. So, but again, it depends on their various different struggles. That's one with anxiety.
That's why I say you have to keep your eyes out. You really, really have to keep an eye when you're dealing with people. You need to keep your wits about you and look. And
you have to love the person too. Like it's not just some sort of conquest, get good, blah blah blah. It's like, I love this person. They've got a lot of hang-ups. Maybe there might be liberalism too, but that's a hang-up. That's a function of some of these deeper struggles, right? They come from a broken family. There's all these things that are hindrances to people that I see. Whereas like maybe another person, they haven't had parents that love them. They haven't had this sort of feeling of love. And so, that's different to me. And that's, I had to get to learn about those type of people where it's difficult for them to express love and affection and some of these warmer, feelings. So that could be an obstacle to Christianity that you're trying to seek to overcome. So the long story short is, you have to look at who you're dealing with, and you have to love that person, and you won't look at them as just some stupid, insane person. You'll look at them and you'll think, darn, they're trapped in this thing.
And they are. I mean, one thing you gotta bear in mind is that on the one hand, everyone is starving for the food and drink you have to offer, but on the other hand, most of them don't realize it.
Yeah.
And like a baby who's angry, they're hungry and they get angry, and they push away the bottle. But I mean, that's what we're here for. It's why we're here.
Absolutely. I don't know if I've said this on the show yet, but the absolute craze over dogs that everybody has, that's just rooted in a longing for innocence. That's all that is. And also maybe just a lack of interest in babies, perhaps, as a substitute. I'm a dog mom, quote unquote. I'm a dog dad. These people who say that, but I believe that that's a yearning for the innocence too. That's there's a warmth there. You never get a dog say, you know what, Vinny, I need more me time. So let's, we can have a date on Friday or whatever. I'll set up some time. The dog is always there for you. It's just pure innocence. And I believe God has put some, dogs here like that to introduce us to things like simplicity. But it's just people don't realize it. And that's what they want. And they just go the other direction on everything else. So,
but do what you can. Remember, it doesn't all depend on you. There's also divine grace, and there's the person's own will. So you do the best you can. You pray very hard for the people involved. As they say, pray as though it all depends on God. Work as though it all depends on you. And don't fret. Just do the best you can. Yeah. And if you get no response, well, then you wipe the dust off your feet. You move on. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so it's a longer episode. I've been wanting to treat you guys to a longer episode. I know you guys, there's a lot of people out there who want one. We didn't really go through the calendar yet, Charles. You are a little bit neglectful on this one, especially because one of my all-time favorite saints is this Monday.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know if it's old calendar or new calendar, but I'm
Old
pretty
calendar is Saint Therese.
Okay, what about old calendar?
The old calendar is Saint Therese of Lisieux.
What about the new calendar?
Well, I don't
It
know.
is Saint
Oh, excuse
Francis.
me. Product placement.
Uh-oh, Magnificat. Yes.
Product placement. Let's see. Sunday, 3rd October. Well, that's not much help. So we'll go to the 4th. It is St. Francis of Assisi.
There you go.
But you don't like St. Francis. You said he was too much of a hippie.
That is a filthy lie. I didn't say that. I read 3 of his books. Biography by St. Bonaventure, which we have. Biography by G.K. Chesterton, which we have. Another one by, I forgot, something Jorgensen, which we don't have, but was also good.
Who is Danish. Famous Danish convert.
And I'm going to be celebrating the Feast of St. Francis with a bottle of St. Francis.
Huh.
One of my favorite, kind of just affordable wines. Good Cabernets and Merlots.
Won't you be watching Brother Sun, Sister Moon?
No, I won't. And I think our parishes, a lot of the local parishes, St. Andrews, everyone's doing the blessing of the animals.
Yes,
And
that's very big.
Father Marco said something so cute, because he's such a good priest. But it's funny to hear the way priests think sometimes, because he's encouraging everyone to bring animals, right? And he's like, it'd be really great if there are some people who bring big animals. I love to bless the big animals, and that's just cute for priests to think like that. They want to bless like a horse or a cow or some livestock or something. Not just dogs all the time.
Not just dogs and cats and goldfish. But let me ask you: on Monday, are you going to pray to God that He make you an instrument of His peace?
Well, I do that more often than on St. Francis. I mean, that's the St. Francis prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's darkness, let me sow light. That's one of my all-time favorite prayers. Yeah.
Let me repeat. Huh.
All
right. Well, fine. What religious order settled the missions of California?
Franciscans.
Oh, well. So what? What order founded Franciscan High in La Cañada?
Well, that's a tough one.
Or St. Francis High.
Oh, okay. I'm joking. But yeah, so
who is the most famous product of St. Francis High in La Cañada?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
Not Bing Crosby. No, much more important.
Bob
he was
Hope?
The man Tumbler House was founded to publish.
Oh, wow. William L. Biersack.
The third.
Wow.
WLB3.
That's ridiculous.
What? That's what he's called.
I know, that's his
WLB3.
His hipster name.
Yeah. But he is the most famous graduate of St. Francis High.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll have you know that Father John Baptist, the name and nothing else, the name of his lead character was taken from one of the priests who taught him at St. Francis High. And he was a priest who was not really dealing very well with the post-Vatican II blues. And in fact, he ended up leaving the priesthood and died alone. Very unhappy story. But when Bill's brother died, none of the priests at St. Bede's or St. Francis would say a Latin Mass for him. It was during the turn of the changeover. And so he literally, 14, he literally grabbed a beer and started crying.
Wait, say that again? And so what?
He went into the rectory in the kitchen, and he literally grabbed a beer and started crying because he couldn't find a priest to offer a Latin Mass for his brother. And then this priest they called Sea Dog Father John Baptist, because he always apparently had a nip, and was kind of a disheveled sort of person. He came in and he asked the young Bill why he was crying. And he told him, and he said, "It's all right. I'll offer your mass for you." And so he offered a Tridentine Requiem for Bill's brother. It was the last one that he would go to for many, many years.
I never knew
And
that story.
well, now you know. And to reward him, Bill, to honor his memory, Bill named his character Father John Baptist after that priest.
Wow. Whew. Well, but though perfect mention, because these are perfect books for October. The Endless Knot, Darkness Did Not, Search for Saint Valeria, Out of the Depths, and In So Much as to Deceive. So these are all spooky books, I guess, if you will.
Yeah,
They got that.
supernatural thrillers.
Yeah.
And it's that spooky time of year. Up the airy mountain and down the rushy glen, we daren't go a hunting for fear of little men. Wee folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. Up the up the craggy hillsides and through the rushes bare, they have planted thorn trees for pleasure here and there. If any man should be so bold to pull them up in spite, he'll find their sharpest thorns in his bed at night.
You said the
What do you think?
words. You said
What's
the
that?
words.
Well, it's okay because I was reciting a poem.
Oh, okay.
But since it's come up, is I'll send our folks off with this lovely poem from Scotland, and I think it's fitting this time of year. Let me see. This is by a Scots poet. Here we go. All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
Now this is dedicated on the part of my neighbors to you. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. It's called The Wee Folk by Donald A. Mackenzie. In the knoll that is the greenest on the grey cliff side, and on the lonely ben top the wee folk bide. They'll flit among the heather and trip upon the brae, the wee folk, the green folk, the red folk and grey. As o'er the moor at midnight the wee folk pass, they whisper among the rushes and o'er the green grass. All through the marshy places they glint and pass away, the light folk, the lone folk, the folk that will not stay. Oh, many a fairy milkmaid with the one eye blind is mid the lonely mountains by the red deer hound. Not one will wait to greet me, for they have naught to say. The hill folk, the still folk, the folk that flit away. When the golden moon is glinting in the deep dim wood, there's a fairy piper playing to the elfin brood. They dance and shout and turn about, and laugh and swing and sway. The droll folk, the knoll folk, the folk that dance alway. Oh, we that bless the wee folk have naught to fear, and ne'er an elfin arrow will come us near. For they'll give skill in music, and every wish obey. The wise folk, the peace folk, the folk that work and play. They'll hasten here at harvest, they will shear and bind. They'll come with elfin music on a western wind. All night they'll sit among the sheaves, or herd the kine that stray. The quick folk, the fine folk, the folk that ask no pay. Betimes they will be spinning the while we sleep. They'll clamber down the chimney, or creep. And when they come to borrow meal, we'll ne'er send them away. The good folk, the honest folk, the folk that work alway. Oh, never wrong the wee folk, the red folk in green, nor name them on the Fridays or at Halloween. The helpless and unwary then, and bairns they lure away. The fierce folk, the angry folk, the folk that steal and slay.
It kind of turns at the end a little bit.
Yeah, everything's la 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 la. So, all I'm saying, boss, all that we're saying is give elves a chance.
Oh.
But the closer we get to Halloween, just remember. However, we've got more coming up. Not just the 4th of St. Francis. The 7th is the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. And that is the anniversary of the Battle of Lepanto. October is the month of the Holy Rosary. And you should be sure, ladies and gentlemen, both to say the Rosary every day, but particularly on October 7th, and read Chesterton's poem, Lepanto.
Available at tumblerhouse.com.
Indeed it is. It's too long for me to recite to you here and now, and you've already gotten a long poem out of me. But be sure to read it. It's a wonderful, wonderful poem, and something that every Catholic should know.
All right, Charles. So,
yes.
With that, I have a question for you.
Oh, tell me, what would that be, out of curiosity?
If it's Monday, what is it?
Off the menu.
Let me write that down.
Okay.
All right, off the menu. Well, but what about the soul you save?
I would say there's an exceedingly good chance it'll be your own.
All right. Thank you, Charles.
We clear on that?
We're clear on that now.
One big question.
Yeah.
Do you think the wee folk shuck and jive?
No.
They don't need to. Actually, think about it. The guy in the poem was doing a little shucking and jiving. They're so wonderful. They're great. We just love them. They're neat. Yeah, they're just they're great. He was doing a little shucking and jiving himself.
Yeah. So, all right, Charles. You stay safe. God bless you, everyone.
See you next week. Ciao, ciao.